Hey students, this is Dr. DB, and I'm contacting you today because I wanted to share a little information with you about your clinical experience placements. I know it can feel somewhat bizarre to be thinking about securing a clinical placement, your first step into the professional world, when you're only 2 days into the program for the students who are starting in summer school. And for those of you who are starting in fall, you can think this seems really early to be talking about this. But the summer school starters, the cohort that starts in the summer, they'll likely be doing, most of those students will likely do your practicum in the fall. And for those of you who start in the fall, fall's a busy time, and summer's a good time to start thinking about what you might want for yourself as you plan out how are you going to approach clinical experiences in this program, the clinical experience courses. Your clinical experience courses in the program are your practicum, and then 2 internships, counseling internship 1 and then counseling internship 2. They each happen in separate semesters. They typically kind of follow each other. Semester practicum, then one for internship 1, and then one for internship 2. The process for identifying a placement is pretty clear. The student finds a site that seems like a good fit for that student, and then the student makes some connections at the site to determine if there would be an appropriate supervisor, and then we go through a process of applying with the program to try to get approval for the site. Now that process is fairly simple on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you're a new student, it can feel very overwhelming to think about how you would go about identifying a site. Practicum is a really interesting experience because it's the one that you can utilize for your secondary specialization. So if you know that what you want to do is your primary professional specialization is school counseling, then you might have a secondary specialization, student affairs and college counseling or clinical mental health counseling. And practicum is a great time to try out those placements, those sorts of placements. The other thing is that if you know that you plan to work in one setting, you can use practicum as a great opportunity to gain some experience in a setting that would be a typical referral source for you as a counselor in your primary site. So if you think you'll work in the student affairs side of things, and you think you'll really do advising, then you might end up trying to do a practicum in career counseling. Or maybe you know you want to be a school counselor and you know that you'll refer families and students to clinical mental health counselors, so you try to find a site that will allow you to do that, maybe through a practicum at East Carolina Behavioral Health or private practice or in some other capacity that's a good fit. But practicum is a good time to try those things out. But for you right now, what's your very first step? Your very first step is to go to our website, the website that's in the signature line of my email. And I'll also send it to all of you again so you'll have it. But go to our website and then click on the Clinical Experiences selection option in the top menu bar. So you'll see Clinical Experiences here at the top. As you scroll down, you'll find some information. There's the practicum manual, the internship manual. You can download those and find out information about those pieces that they tell you pretty much everything you're going to have to do in those places, in those clinical experiences. The other things you might go through the initial information about the counselor ed clinical experiences. What was our intro information? And there's a Q&A sheet to try to answer some basic questions for you. If you have questions about finding a site and supervisor, you can always contact Dr. Crow, who's our clinical experiences coordinator, or your advisor can help you with that. We have a little site database that will be updated and some information will be added. And then the application links. We'll touch on those application links in just a minute. But your initial steps. So these steps are a little more advanced than our most basic initial steps. Your first initial step is to start by thinking, where do I want to do? What sort of site do I want to use for my practicum? Like, do you want to do clinical mental health, student affairs and college counseling, or school for practicum? And then from there, why? Why do you want to do that? Is this a good career move for you? Does it provide you with an opportunity to get your foot in the door somewhere you want to work? Or does it provide you with an opportunity to make a connection who you think will be an awesome reference for you when you start applying for jobs? Or does it allow you insight into processes and programs that you wouldn't otherwise be able to gain insight into if you didn't do this practicum? Why? Why this site? Why is it a good fit for you? If you answer those questions and you feel like, yes, this site, this type of setting, this site, this place, that will be good for me, then you go through their rosters of professionals there and say, who could be my site supervisor? The site supervisor requirements are included in your internship, your practicum manual, your internship manual. They have to have 2 years of experience, and they have to hold whatever license is appropriate to their setting. So your site supervisor in a school does not have to hold an LPC. That's great if they do, but if they don't, that's okay. But they have to be licensed as a school counselor. If you are in a site that does not have any licensed counselors, let's say you're doing some work with a nonprofit, that can be fine, because what we can do is find a site supervisor for you who's in some way connected to that nonprofit, or familiar with the situation, or familiar with you, or familiar with our program, and willing to supervise your practice there. So maybe you're doing some counseling, some group counseling, but there's no one on site who has the right degree or the right years of experience, or maybe the right license. Well, then maybe we can find you someone off-site who's in some way connected to your site and able to provide that supervision. So you find your site, and then you determine who would be the appropriate supervisor. Then you set up a meeting with that person, and you just explain what it is you're trying to do. Practicum is a 100-hour experience. You have to have 60%, at least 60% of that has to be direct service. That's going to be service in some capacity that's face-to-face and engaged with clients, stakeholders, other professionals who are working with you on teams and in your work there at the site. You have to be engaged with real people. You have to be engaged in the work of the counselor there as appropriate for your setting for at least 60% of the time, or in the case of Practicum, 60 hours, because it's a 100-hour experience. Practicum generally breaks down over the course of a 15-week semester with thinking about breaks, or maybe some difficulties related to weather or illness for you. We typically tell students to try to schedule about 8 hours a week. If you can schedule 8 hours a week, then you should be fine. You have some weeks that you may need fewer, some weeks that you are there and you're able to do a few more, but if you schedule 8 hours a week, you should be pretty set. So you found your site, you found someone who's willing to work with you, and then you submit the application. When you go to this part, you see under Preparing for Clinical Experiences, you just click the link for the online application for Practicum and you enter your information. We typically ask for students to have a primary site and a backup site in case they have any difficulty with their primary site. If it does not get approved or if it falls through, then to have something on the back burner. When you're starting in fall and you're turning it in summer, that's a little less of a concern because you've got a little more time. So if you only have one site and you turn that in now, then that's okay, because if something happens and it falls through, we still have time to adjust. During that other year, from when you're turning it in fall for a spring practicum or a spring internship, you have a little less time, so it's better to have that backup site clearly in place. But the backup site is not mandatory. You just have to know that if something happened, that you'd have to find another site and it could impact your engagement in the course, right? Submit your application. Dr. Crow reviews that application and determines if it's an appropriate site and an appropriate site supervisor, and provides you with an approval or not. You'll get that information covered. Then what you do is you get your liability insurance. Don't get that until it's closer to fall, but get your liability insurance. You can do that right at this website here. There are a couple of other options for doing that, getting that insurance, and we can talk about that later as well. And you ask your site supervisor to complete the site supervisor training if they haven't already done that. Once we get into the semester, you'll have to do a demographic survey about your site to share a little information with your site, and then these materials will be part of the materials that you use for your clinical experiences as we go along. These things are going to be updated some this summer, so you'll see some changes there too. At the end, we do some conclusion pieces, and you do not need to worry about those now. And this part is for faculty only. But for yourself at this point, what you want to be doing is finding a site that's a good fit for you if you're planning to do your placement during the fall. And for those of you who are starting in the summer, it's likely you're going to do your placement in the fall. If you have any questions about potential placements or sites that might be a good fit, then please feel free to reach out to me or to Dr. Crow. Dr. Crow is our clinical experiences coordinator and can answer all questions that you have. And I'm always willing to help, and if I can help, just let me know. If you have sites that are close to you and you feel like they'd be a good fit, but you're just not certain if they quite fit, run it by us. We'll see what we can get worked out. We want you to have the best experience possible. So at this point, you need to be finding a site. If you're doing practicum in the fall, then you need to be finding a site where you'd be able to complete 100 hours of service. That's clinical service, counseling service. It will not all be individual counseling. You'll be doing what's appropriate for a counselor at your site, your setting, okay? But you need to be able to do 100 hours of service. At least 60% of it has to be direct service, and that equates, with adjustments as appropriate for a regular, typical semester progression, it equates to about 8 hours a week. You need to make sure that you have a site supervisor, someone who's either on your site or in some way affiliated with your site or connected to your site that is willing to provide you with supervision, and you meet with them about an hour a week. You can do that virtually, you can do it face-to-face. There are a lot of options for that, but you need to be able to meet with that supervisor about an hour a week. To get the best understanding of what's expected in practicum, check out this practicum manual. And then if you have any questions, please let me or please let Dr. Crow know. And we are here to help. Thank you.